Alrighty, so today we are sitting down for another one-shot review. Today the movie that I watched was Chronicle on this here Blu-ray, and yeah, so just to get into it, one thing I want to say is that I watched the theatrical version of this movie, and I just want to put out a disclaimer that if you like this movie, I like this movie, but you want more footage just because that would be kind of a novelty, then yeah, feel free to watch the director's cut lost footage edition. But we watched that version probably like 2 years ago, and I just remember it dragging on way too long, and it was hard because it was me trying to show this movie to my girlfriend for the first time, that she had seen it, and then all of a sudden I'm saddling her with this version of it that has some serious woes. But so anyway, that's just my disclaimer before I even talk about the movie. I watched the theatrical version. I would not recommend the director's cut unless you just want to see extra footage. But that being said, let's get into the movie. So this movie is about three people. One of them being Michael B. Jordan. Another one being the kid. Well, he's not a kid anymore. He's like an adult, but he plays like, I don't know. I guess in Dumb Money, I just saw him as the manager of the GameStop, but he's in a bunch of other things. He just has that kind of creepy look to him, and then, no offense to the guy, but he knows why he gets casted. And then the third guy, honestly don't know if he's in anything else, but maybe he should be. I feel like he didn't do a bad job in this movie. Anyway, so what happens is it's a found footage film. I forgot that part about it too when watching this again, but it is basically all from the perspective of video camera about three individuals who find this sort of glowing rock while they're at a party, and they all of a sudden get superpowers in the form of telekinesis, which later turns into flying and all sorts of other things. Essentially like the Force, to be honest. But what do I have to say about this movie? Well, I think that when watching this movie, it's easy to forget about the context of when it came out, but it came out during the fad of all that found footage movies. So think like Apollo 18 and Paranormal Activity, stuff like that. But it also came probably right before. I mean, I know that the superhero movies had started up. I'm pretty sure Iron Man had already been out by the time this came out, but the huge Marvel thing had not happened yet. I'm pretty sure in this movie they said that they were graduating seniors in 2012. So just to kind of give you an idea, that's probably around the time that this came out. That being said, this movie follows some interesting character points. I think that, just to give you an example, our three people in this movie are, one of them is the guy running to be the class president. Another one is a guy who psychoanalyzes everything for no reason and is almost like too cool to have fun. And then the third guy is somebody that gets abused by his dad, and his mom's very sick, and he gets bullied at school, and he feels very weak. And those three personality traits sort of build out the way that these powers are perceived by the individuals, as well as how the story develops moving forward. And just to kind of do a little recap of the plot but not do any big spoilers, essentially you start to find out that at first they're using these powers for fun as they're sort of just developing it over time. But then as the movie goes on, they sort of have that Spider-Man moment where they realize that with these powers, you have to have some level of responsibility, especially as they start to get more powerful moving on. So, but that being said, I guess, I'm like racking my brain. I just watched this literally minutes ago, and I'm racking my brain trying to think of ways to talk about this without spoiling it or anything like that. But I think I'll just leave it at that. If you want to see a cool found footage film about kids that get superpowers in their senior year of high school, and how that develops over time and turns almost into this like very dramatic thriller of a movie, then I would say you'd definitely be into this movie. So, what are some of the things that I like about this movie? I like that when they first get the powers, there's a very lighthearted tone to a lot of the found footage where, first they're just kind of fucking around in the backyard and they're throwing the baseball at each other to see who can stop it from hitting their face. Then they're like juggling things. Then, they're eventually one day the guy figures out how to fly. And so that's like a whole novel thing. And then they have all this footage where they're going to different places in public and screwing with people on camera, like making their cart move, or they make this teddy bear sort of animate in front of this child and that freaks them the hell out, and all that kind of stuff. All those moments are so hilarious, and I think that they do a great job of making all of the characters very personable in those moments, and it translates well through the screen. And I just thought all that was really cool, and it contrasts so well to sort of the way that the momentum builds in the second act of this movie. And so that I thought was really cool. Another thing that I think I like about this movie a lot is that it explores sort of a more realistic idea of what would happen if a bunch of people got powers in a small area, especially with the fact that, you're able to see through the personalities of each character. Like, for example, the guy that's the class president, he has a lot of fun with it. He's doing all sorts of jokes. He's joking about like using the powers on his girlfriend while they're having sex. Like, he's the one that's mainly trying to do this big magic show thing at the talent show, and they're messing with people in the stores. Like, he's having a good time. And when the other guy is talking about the moral responsibility that they have to treat these powers with respect, he sort of is on the same side as him, even though he's a little bit goofier. Similarly, the guy that psychoanalyzes everything, the second they get powerful enough to where they feel like they could actually injure somebody, he immediately becomes like the Superman of the group. If you think about DC superheroes, where he's coming in and he's laying down the law as far as like, we need to be good people. We need to not use this on living things. We need to not use it on each other. We need to be careful with it. We can't destroy stuff. Like, he all of a sudden starts rattling off all these rules in morality. And similarly, the same, the third guy who's getting the shit kicked out of him every day, he immediately goes, you don't get to just set these rules. Like, you start to see the build in his character where, being somebody that had been thrashed by society so much, once he gains power, and some might say too quickly, he starts to become this bully figure himself, and he sees himself as, like in the trailer, there's this classic moment that I remember that was kind of a meme of him being like, explaining the existence of apex predators and how, a predator wouldn't feel bad about squashing an ant or something like that. And you start to see how, it becomes this sort of examination of what would happen if certain types of people got powers. And some might say, like, there's a reality where the kid that is going through a lot of trauma could turn out to be a good person in the end. But unfortunately, not to spoil anything, but I think psychologically he's too far gone. And this movie shows how these sort of powers can accelerate that and almost cause him to be the thing that he feared or disliked so much in his own life. But I really liked how that is basically the main focus of the film, and I really like how the movie starts out as a fun, cool thing, how they get all these powers, and then the consequences of being people with this sort of ability start to seep in towards the end of the movie, and the characters have to wrestle with that. I'm trying really hard not to bring stuff up because I feel like I want people to watch this movie and get it on like a first try. But that being said, I do think that the movie at times kind of plays into the emotional weight of what's happening to the kid who's being bullied by his dad, by people at school, feeling like he's isolated, all that kind of stuff. And because of that, they almost lay it on so thick that it's obvious from very early on in the movie that he's going to take a turn for the worse. But it's unfortunate, I feel like, the way that it actually does happen is kind of heartbreaking. And so even if I were to have that thought where I'm saying they laid it on too thick, they then sort of follow it up with the correct amount of counterpoints, I guess. But I say all that to say, I think this is a really good movie. And I think that if you haven't seen it, you should probably see this movie, especially if you're interested in these sort of found footage type of films. I just think that, unfortunately, in the grand scheme of things, this movie kind of gets lost in the shuffle in the conversation of other movies and things like that. And for good reason. There's nothing particularly super profound happening in this movie, but I think that it is almost a hidden gem in the way that it's a very unique story, and maybe it becomes played out now that we've seen a million superhero movies, but I feel like this is a very unique story, and the way that it is portrayed through the found footage makes a lot of sense, especially given, there's a really smart metaphor in here where, you have to ask yourself, why is this kid filming every part of his life? And, if you are this kid that's getting the crap beat out of him every day by his dad and other people, you want to have, and they call it, in the film, they call it out as like Michael B. Jordan's character is like, don't you feel like that's kind of weird? Like you're putting a barrier between you and other people? And he's like, maybe I want a barrier. And so I feel like that was kind of clever how they pulled in the whole, impetus for the found footage aspect of it through that character's personality and the things that he was going through. But anyway, I think it's an interesting movie. I think that it is in some ways very unique compared to other movies. And it is on its own as a movie better than a lot of other found footage movies that I've seen. Like I just talked about Apollo 18 a second ago. While that movie is really interesting, and for another reason, because it's talking about like aliens being on the moon, and that's the reason why we haven't gone back to the moon and stuff like that. That's an interesting found footage horror film aspect, But that movie as a movie is kind of weak. And after you watch it once and the novelty of sort of the gag is worn off, it doesn't really hold up that well. Whereas I've watched this movie probably 4 times over the last 10 years, and each time I watch it, even with the director's cut, I have things that I feel like are really good about the movie. And so I think that in that way, it holds its own as it ages. So I don't have a lot to say because I would kind of get into the dynamics between the different kinds of characters and things like that, between, how certain plot points happen and what that means about how the de-evolution of certain characters, goodness or whatever. But I'll leave that for somebody else to talk about in a much longer video. So just to plug this one in, if you do have the chance somehow in the future, because, I just saw The Exorcist in theaters yesterday, I would actually totally watch this movie in theaters again. And I watched it in theaters back in the day, and it slapped. So I would say absolutely see it in theaters if you have the opportunity. But as we are now in the modern year of 2023, and this came out damn near 11 years ago, it's probably not going to be possible. So definitely watch it at home. Hopefully it's on streaming somewhere. If not, grab the Blu-ray. I got this for, I think, $3 at the exchange. So there you go. And then what would I rate this movie? I think as a movie, it is a strong... No. I'm gonna say it's a low 4. And solely because it, as its own, as a movie, doesn't commit any horrible sort of stupid movie plot point sins. And the movie, if you watch the theatrical version, is pretty condensed, short and sweet, hour and a half. It doesn't overstay its welcome. And I feel like it has a very unique story to tell. So that's why I'm going to give it a low 4. I could understand why people would give it maybe a strong 3 and not really put it up into a 4. But if I want this video series to be something that chronicles, not to make a joke, but that chronicles my taste over time, I think that I would definitely give this a low 4, given my opinion. So that's the movie. You know, that's Chronicle. If you agree, feel free to like the video or not. I don't really care. If you disagree and you dislike the video, let me know what you disagree with me about in the comments. If you want to have a friendly debate about, you know, maybe you think this movie is less cool than I think it is, absolutely here for that. And then, you know, subscribe if you want to, but that's the Chronicle review. We're giving it a low 4. See it in theaters if you can. And that's the video.